Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Have you picked up Kowabana Volume 9 yet? It's available now. If you're ready for another terrifying round of scares straight out of Japan, head over to Amazon and pick up your copy right now. We've got shrines, curses, ghosts, angry ancestors, abandoned buildings, terrifying schools, and much more, so don't miss out. This week, we're looking at tales of bizarre and dangerous encounters. Our first story actually takes place in 2 countries and involves the girlfriend of a young woman's university friend. This friend's parents don't agree with his relationship with the girl, but why do they oppose it so much? Do they know something the others don't? Find out in Kodoku Woman. I became friends with F from Taiwan when he came to Japan to study Japanese. He was educated in the US. His father was a leading banker in Taiwan. His older sister was married and living in California, and his older brother, who had returned to Taiwan at the time, was a lecturer at the Harvard Business School, so they were a big, elite family. As for F himself, he returned to Taiwan after graduating from university and started his own company dealing with publishing rights for things like anime and manga. He visited Japan several times a year for work, and when he did, we would meet up and talk about anime, manga, and other such things. He spoke in Japanese while I spoke in English, so both of us were trying to improve our language skills, and we got along pretty well. One time, he brought his girlfriend with him to Japan while he met the company president and editor of the publishing company for Kodoku Comics. But for some unknown reason, his family was against them dating. His girlfriend was tiny and slim, the type of girl you'd want to protect, and there didn't seem to be anything weird or bad about her. She seemed like a totally regular girl. The only thing was that she suffered from polio when she was a child, leading to her losing the usage of one of her legs, and the doctor also told her that she'd never be able to get pregnant. Other than that, to me, a foreigner, it didn't make much sense why they'd opposed their marriage. At the time, she was working for the same publishing company he first worked for, and so she was in Japan on work as well. He spoke about his parents' disapproval with such a heavy tone. I didn't know why he was so gloomy about it, so I was just like, yeah, that is strange. And that was the end of that. In December of that same year, I finally visited Taipei with 2 of my friends after repeated invitations from F. I'm generally not afraid of traveling by myself, but he was so excited about our trip before we left that he drew up a whole plan for us in advance. We faxed back and forth about all the things we wanted to do and places we wanted to go. And so, we decided to leave it up to him, and I went to Taipei with my friends M and Y, without thinking too much about it. F waited for us at the hotel, and we immediately went out to eat at a famous local Peking duck restaurant. There, F's girlfriend was waiting for us. We chatted and had fun together, and after dinner, talked about the schedule for the next day. After that, whenever F wasn't with his family or friends, she was with him instead. She sure has a lot of free time, huh? One of my friends asked him, to which F replied that his girlfriend had quit her job and was staying at home to take care of things there. Even so, his parents still heavily opposed their relationship. My other friend asked him why. Because she's a Hakka, an outsider, and she's not a native Taiwanese person. Her family is from mainland China. That was the reason. I didn't know why his friends and family would make such a big deal over that, but it was a personal matter, and our countries had different customs and cultures, so even though we didn't get it, we left it at that. On the second night of our trip, we had great fun at a fancy Taiwanese restaurant with F's older brother and his girlfriend. "Have you met F's girlfriend?" Emily, his brother's girlfriend, asked me. She's almost always with him, I answered. Emily seemed surprised at that. Did you hear that his family doesn't want them together? She asked. I did, but I don't really know why, I answered. It's her family that's the problem, Emily said. And that was the end of that conversation. Later, as we were walking down the street to get some tea, F's face suddenly changed colour and he ran off. His girlfriend was walking towards us from the other side of the street. Did you agree to meet up here? I asked, but F said it was just a coincidence. Emily's face suddenly lost all colour, and his brother quickly fell silent as well. My friends and I found the whole situation strange. F's girlfriend joined us and casually asked, "So, what did you get up to today?" The atmosphere was oddly uncomfortable. Anyway, although she had been kind to us at first, F's girlfriend soon started to act hostile towards us. I also started to think that F himself seemed different to how he was when I first met him. He had changed. After that, we returned to Japan. Let's start from there. We were subject to his girlfriend's venom right up until the very end, but after we safely returned home, we shrugged it off as nothing more than a jealous girlfriend. We were all women, after all. We tried to forget about that and just remember the good times. Then in February the following year, I woke up one day feeling rather lethargic and my body heavy. I tried to get up out of bed, but I couldn't. This went on and on for several days. I honestly felt terrible. I went to the doctor, but apparently there was nothing wrong with me. That's odd, I thought, and before long, I got a call from Y. Izumi-chan, what happened to that card you got from F's girlfriend? Yeah, on the second day of our trip, she gave each of us a laminated picture of what looked like Kannon-sama. She handed them over with a smile at an Italian restaurant, saying she was studying Buddhism and so she bought them. My family didn't really like receiving such religious objects, so during the New Year holidays, we had it ceremonially burnt. I couldn't just come out and say that, however, so while I was fumbling around, thinking of what to say, Y interrupted. If you still have it, then take it to the nearest temple or shrine and have them dispose of it right away, she said. Why? I asked. When she told me, a chill ran down my spine. Apparently, she suddenly started bleeding irregularly around New Year's. She went to the doctor, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, nor could they stop the bleeding, and she ended up becoming terribly anemic. Y worked with knives, so she always made sure to purify the northeast section of her house with salt. Then, she remembered the religious charm she got from F's girlfriend, so she put it near the salt to purify it without a second thought as well, and went to bed. When she woke up and went to get the morning newspaper, her face went pale. The salt had melted clean away. It was February, the middle of winter. Afraid, Y went with a friend to the temple where the salt was made and showed the chief priest the charm. He let out a gasp the moment he saw it and blood started to pour from his nose. Y almost passed out herself. There's nothing wrong with the charm itself, he said. Although, it's not common sense to laminate such a sacred image. Who did you get this from? He said the person I got it from possessed a terribly strong negative influence. It wasn't something they wanted to do, but something about her was terribly wrong. He asked if anyone else had received the same thing, and if so, they should take them to the temple or shrine to be disposed of right away, or else something terrible would happen. Izumi-chan, are you listening to me? That priest, even though he can purify things, he couldn't dispose of it himself. He said he had to take it to another temple to get it done. I told her honestly that I'd already gotten rid of mine with a high-ranking priest. That just left M. She didn't really believe in such things and had been carrying it around in her notebook all that time. When we told her, she just cheerfully replied, "Okay." And that was the end of that. Or so we thought. In June, M's mother was suddenly hospitalized. They said she had a benign brain tumor and operated right away. Immediately after the doctors gave the okay, they found yet another tumor and she had to have surgery yet again. In July, her father, exhausted from taking care of her mother, discovered that he had cancer. "Em, do you by any chance still have that card?" I asked her after thinking it over. "I do. It's still in my notebook," she answered. She explained that she didn't have the time to visit a shrine or temple, so Y told her to write a letter, include some money, and just take it to a temple, which M did right away. 1 month later, as her father was having an open abdominal exam, there was nothing left but a scar. They couldn't find any signs of cancer, and it was gone, just like that. During the summer of that year, F and his girlfriend got married. I received an invitation to the wedding, but I cut off all relations with them entirely. Then, half a year later, Y visited Taiwan and was apparently invited to F's parents' house. F's mother greeted her warmly, and she heard that his mother had finally given in and agreed to the marriage, but his father stubbornly refused until the very end. Then, 1 month before the wedding, he suddenly died of a heart attack. After that, nobody spoke a word of F's girlfriend. I wondered what on earth could be going on, but then someone told me something interesting. There's apparently a family in China that really uses bugs and animals to create Kodoku magic and spells. I think that she comes from that family. Apparently there are a lot of women that possess high abilities when it comes to Kodoku, and they don't even have to use bugs or animals to do it. They can just think the curse into being. When I heard that, well, it seems likely that that man was enchanted by her. You were right to cut off all ties. It could have cost you your life in the end. But I think in the end his family would have accepted her. I hope that his older brother and such are okay. You said that she said she couldn't have kids, but apparently for people who use bugs in their magic, they're only able to have one kid, so I think she probably can too. And that child will no doubt be a girl. Those who use bugs tend to be women, after all. I ran into F by chance 2 years later thanks to our work. "Izumi, I've become a father," he said. "Yeah, she said she couldn't have children, but now we have a baby. I've become a father of a little girl." This next story features a common tradition in Japan known as chinowa, which is a ring of grass that people step through as part of a purification ritual in the summer. In this particular village, the ritual has a few unique rules that people mustn't break. But of course, a few children decide to mess around and find out what happens if they do. Naturally, it doesn't end well. This one's called Chigaya. This is a story about what happened to me in my hometown 7 years ago, and then followed me all the way to Tokyo when I ran. I was born in what you might now call a marginal village with a population of less than 100 people. There were 8 children. Me, A's younger brother, B's older sister, C, D, and E. Most of the time I hung out with A's younger brother, B, and C, just the 5 of us. Every year around the end of June, all the villagers would visit a shrine on the outskirts of town and pass through a large ring of Chigaya grass to pray for health for the upcoming year. When I say they would pass through the grass, it was a rather major summer purification rite, so I think most people will know of it. Now, when you pass through the grass, There are apparently various tiny things you have to do, like the first foot you put forward, turning right or left, etc., etc. But kids were never forced to follow these closely, so I don't know the full details. There were, however, 3 rules that mustn't be broken. First was that you had to chant Somin Shodai, Somin Shodai when you stepped through the ring. You had to say it twice. Second was that you mustn't turn around after passing through the ring of grass until you reached and were finished praying to the Goshintai. And third, you must not pull a piece of grass out of the ring and take it home with you. These were the 3 rules our parents and grandparents strictly told us that we must obey every year. 7 years ago, around the end of May, I was playing with my 4 friends as usual. We were playing hide and seek in the trees along the path leading to the shrine. Up in the shrine grounds, we could see the Chigaya grass ring was being prepared for the ceremony. We stopped for a rest after playing for a while, and then A suggested something. I wonder what will happen if we break the rules when we pass through the Chigaya. As kids, we called the Chigaya grass ring simply Chigaya. Our dialect is also pretty heavy, so I'll do my best to write it in standard Japanese. "You're thinking of doing something weird again, aren't you?" A's younger brother said. A was pretty good at coming up with interesting ideas, and he often came up with new games that we all loved. He must have been bored at the time and thinking of something to relieve that boredom again. "They said we're not allowed to break the rules. But yeah, I wonder what would happen if we did," I said. "They'll get angry. Let's not take it any further," C said. "What are you saying? Nobody watches, do they?" A replied. "For sure. On the day we had to pass through the ring, we went towards the main shrine building one by one, passed through the ring, then came back. And for some reason, nobody watched as you did this. People just went one by one." In the end, C and A's younger brother didn't want to go through with it, but A, B, and I did. We made a pact that we would break the rules just to see what would happen. But the grown-ups had always been so adamant about not breaking the rules that we didn't want to break all 3 at once. So, being that there were exactly 3 of us, we agreed to break 1 rule each. Pulling out a piece of grass would probably be the hardest thing to do, so A agreed to do that. B would break the first rule by not chanting the special words, and I would break the second by turning around after passing through the ring. Then, 1 month later, the day finally arrived. I couldn't stop thinking about it ever since A suggested we break the rules, so I was full of excitement. When I got to the shrine that afternoon, B had already finished passing through the ring, and he waved to me from where he sat on the shrine grounds. I walked right over and sat next to him. "So, what happened?" I whispered. Of course, I was referring to our plan. I didn't say the chant, but as you can see, nothing happened. "Of course it didn't," he whispered back. "Huh. Well, sure, of course," I laughed. "Well, I'm up next." Right as my mother made her way back, I got up and started toward the main shrine building. I was all alone and it was awfully quiet. Yet it felt like someone was watching me, and suddenly I was afraid. I remembered a chant my mother had taught me long ago, although I couldn't remember the whole thing. I chanted what I could remember as I slowly stepped through the ring. The moment I turned back around, I sensed something terrifying behind me. My instinct screamed that I was in trouble, so I quickly turned back. Several minutes passed. No, it was probably only 10 or 20 seconds. At the same time, I heard a voice so low right beside my ear that it couldn't have been human. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but I was the only person there at the time. despite the early summer heat, all the hairs on my body stood on end. In the end, I was too scared to look back. I finished my trip and returned to the shrine grounds. I told B what happened, but he just laughed. It pissed me off. Then C arrived, and the three of us chatted once he was done passing through the ring. In the evening, A's family arrived. "Ah, A's here! Hey, you're late," B said. I forgot to mention it, but it was also forbidden to pass through the ring after sunset as well. "So, did you guys do it?" A asked. Nothing happened to me, although apparently he ran into a monster and nearly lost it. "I said shut up about that already," I said. Anyway, in the end I couldn't turn around. "You're such a scaredy cat," A said. "Alright, well, then I'll turn around and take a piece of grass home then." "Are you seriously gonna do it?" C asked. I thought I should tell him to quit while we were ahead as well, but then I thought that maybe if he experienced what I did, then B would finally believe me, so I didn't say anything. I really should have stopped him at the time, and I can't express how much I regret that now. A started walking towards the main shrine building, and as I chatted with B and C, he returned before long. Everything looked perfectly normal. "Well, did you turn around?" I asked. "Yeah, there was nothing there," he said. "I got some of the grass too. I'll show you over there. Come on." We knew we'd be in big trouble if the grown-ups knew what we were doing, so we pretended we were going to play and ran off behind the trees. At the same time, A's younger brother left to go walk through the ring of grass himself. A then pulled out a piece of the Chigaya out of his pocket. The rest of us were silent and, for a brief period, couldn't say a thing. The Chigaya, which should have been grass-coloured, had turned black. "What the hell?" "Well, that's gross," A said. "Did you really pull that out of the ring?" C asked. "Maybe it withered up because of your body heat," B suggested. "You left it in your pocket, right?" I was pretty scared, but it had to be just like B said. C kept talking anxiously around us, but A no longer felt comfortable walking around with the grass, so he threw it down on the spot. He didn't want his younger brother to get scared and tell his parents, so we decided to keep it a secret from him as well. Eventually, the final 2 or 3 groups finished passing through the Chigaya ring, and then everyone went home. A few days later, A complained of a headache while we were playing, and then he stopped coming outside. On the 3rd night after he got ill, his father came flying into our house in a rage. We were eating dinner at the time, but after my mother spoke to him at the front door, she returned with a terrifying look on her face that I'd never seen before. "We're leaving right now, so get your jacket." It was pretty late for me, being just a kid, so I knew that if we were going out, it had to be for something big. My mother and I went straight over to A's house with his father. On the way, they continued to whisper to each other. I could only catch a few words here and there, but I remembered hearing ears, contagious, bug, and A's younger brother's name. When we got there, A's younger brother, B, C, S-san from the neighborhood for some reason, and even the local Shinto priest were already there and seated. All of the kids looked pale. "Is this everyone?" the priest asked. "Then once again, let me ask you what happened that day." What are you talking about?" I said. "The day you walked through the ring, of course," S-san said. "You broke the rules, didn't you? What did you do?" She was angry, yet because of her sudden outburst, nobody said or did a thing. "A isn't in any condition to see anyone right now," the priest said. "Or rather, it's better that you don't see him. We heard from his brother that you all came up with a plan to break the rules. I'd like you to tell me what exactly it was that you did." B, C, and I then took turns telling him what happened. About A coming up with the idea, and then the three of us going through with it. B didn't say the chant, but nothing happened. I turned around and experienced something strange. And then, as I was telling them about A pulling a piece of grass out, A's father's face went white as a ghost. "So then, the one who pulled the Chigaya out, that was A, yes?" the priest asked. "Did you see him return with it?" "It turned pitch black," C said. "Then we got scared and decided to keep it a secret." His voice trembled. At that moment, A's mother opened the sliding door and entered the room. "There is nothing more we can do for A," the priest said. "It's an old, terribly strong curse. Once it develops, there is no way to deal with it." "Is that so?" A's mother said. Even though the death of her son had just been proclaimed, she didn't cry. Something was clearly wrong. As everyone remained silent, the priest once again started talking to us kids. "You saw the blackened Chigaya, didn't you? I'm going to purify it, so we're going to head over to the shrine right now. Just in case, I'd like A's brother to come with us as well. Also, was there anyone here who looked behind them?" Thank goodness I didn't go through with it. Even at a time like that, I was only thinking of myself. We silently walked over to the shrine, and S-san joined us. When we got there, it seemed other people had already been contacted, and there were 3 or 4 other grown-ups there. "It might be a little tough, but I'd like you to do your best to make it through this one night. Your lives depend on it." We trembled as we were led to a dark room at the other end of the shrine. I don't even want to remember what happened next. Over and over, S-san and the other grown-ups made us rinse our mouths out with vinegar and sake. I think the priest was praying outside the whole time, but I don't really remember it so well. At any rate, the night was hell. As morning approached, the priest entered the dim room. "It's over for now, but are you tired?" Of course, none of us were sleepy in the slightest. Perhaps the priest could see that, because he then started to tell us about the origins of the Chigaya ring and what would happen next. The Chigaya ring is a ritual held during summer to pray for good health. It's rather famous all over Japan, so you children know at least that much, don't you? Well, long ago, there were 2 brothers by the names of Somin Shodai and Kotan Shodai. A kami-sama once visited each of them and asked for a place to stay, and although he was poor, Somin Shodai warmly greeted the kami-sama and invited him in. However, although he was wealthy, Kotan Shodai refused the kami-sama, and so that kami-sama told Somin Shodai to attach a ring of Chigaya around his waist. Several years later, a plague broke out in the area. Somin Shodai's family was okay because of the grass, but Kotan Shodai's family fell ill. And that is said to be the origin of passing through the Chigaya ring. However, we have a completely different reason here compared to the rest of the country. This is what the priest told us. One day, a mysterious plague broke out in an area surrounded by mountains, and it steadily continued to spread. The villagers feared the disease and sought help, but the villagers from the other side of the mountain refused to go near them. Then one day, a man visited their village and introduced them to the custom of the Chigaya grass ring. After that, the plague disappeared, just like that. But although the custom continued, numerous people died strange deaths after passing through the ring. Their deaths were horrible. They broke out in rashes over their entire bodies, and their skin festered as it let off a horrific smell. One time, they cut into the stomach of one of the people who died and found countless insects eating the inside of him. On top of that, all of the people who died claim to have seen something behind them after they passed through the ring. The villagers thought it had to be the wrath of a tatarigami spreading the illness. Apparently, if you turn around after passing through the ring, you'll see the figure of the angry tatarigami who can't pass through the cleansed space. Anyone who sees that figure will be cursed and never able to recover. The ring of grass is made with purified Chigaya and woven with prayers. If you pull a piece out, the Chigaya loses its purification powers and will instead become a target for the tatarigami. And so, there was no way to save A, who had touched it. The next day, B, C, and A's younger brother broke out into a fever. S-san said that the evil had been driven out, so they would be okay. But several days passed and I was the only one that nothing happened to. Then, 2 weeks later, A passed away. We were devastated. The death of a friend is a massive event to children. We later overheard from conversations the grown-ups had that he died vomiting a massive amount of worms. B, C, and A's younger brother recovered from their fevers after 3 days, but we continued visiting the shrine because the grown-ups told us to. Yet, the eyes of the priest seemed to grow more and more severe as he looked at me each time. About a month later, the priest summoned me alone. "I think you should leave here," he said. "I've been watching you for this past month, but there's no sign of it leaving." "What do you mean?" "You didn't turn around on the day you passed through the ring, nor did you touch it, did you? But there was the presence and voice you heard. If something really did slip through, and yet nothing has happened yet, then that's odd." After the purification, I was the only one who didn't fall ill with a fever. "It would appear that you yourself were targeted by the tatarigami. I cannot cleanse you. There is nothing I can do," he said. "If you have been possessed, then this village will fall into ruin. Of course, you will die as well. You must go far away, forget about this place. But even then, the time will come someday. It will follow you. By extending your own life, you will be doing the same for us as well." My mind went blank. I couldn't think of anything. My father and I moved to Tokyo, just the two of us. He came from another part of the country, while the village was my mother's hometown. After much discussion, my father alone was allowed to leave. Looking back on it now, I'm sure that my father was prepared to die for me. 3 months ago, he passed away. Yesterday, I found an envelope on my doorstep. There was no name nor sender on it. Inside was something I didn't want to remember, but something I could never forget. A piece of Chigaya grass, dyed black. So, that's that. It's over. It's found me. I'm going to get my affairs in order and return home in 3 days. It will be 7 years since I was last home. I have no idea what's going on there. I haven't been in contact with them since I left. Since moving, I've tried to stay as far away from them as possible. But if you're alive, then you make connections with things. There's that awful connection I made with a kami-sama, but also the people who were kind to me at my father's extremely small funeral. I want to wrap things up as neatly as possible before I go back. In this next story, a man has a friend with a rather unique ability. She's able to tell if a shrine gate is alive or dead, simply by passing through it. But what happens when she senses that same feeling when there's no shrine gate in sight? Find out in Passing Through the Shrine Gate. This happened a little while ago, although it's not something I can feel or see. I moved out of the countryside and into the city when I started work and started living alone for the first time. Just the other day, a childhood friend came to see me. This friend has always been able to do one special thing that other people can't. When she passed through a shrine gate, she can tell if that shrine gate is alive or if it's dead. Apparently it's just a feeling she has, although neither me nor my other friends have ever understood it. So I asked if she still has that feeling and she said yes. On our way out, I decided to have her pass through a shrine gate and see it in action. There were only 2 shrines, but apparently one of them was dead. Both shrines looked the same to me, so I had absolutely no idea. Plus, even if you know if one is alive or dead, it wasn't like that meant anything special, apparently. Neither of us were really big fans of occult or supernatural things, so we put the subject aside, finished shopping, and then went to return home. That was when something pretty scary happened. My apartment is at the top of a mountain. The stairs are a little tiring, but I told her there was a shortcut. Yet as we got closer, she suddenly stopped walking. Like, stopped dead on the spot. It was like there was a wall there that only she could see. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Eh? Why? Eh?" she muttered, looking confused. Her eyes ran all over the place with an anxious look on her face. "I don't like this place. I don't like it at all," she said, stepping back like she was about to run away. "What is it?" I asked again. There's a shrine gate here," she said. When I heard that, a chill ran down my spine. The way she said it wasn't like the shrine gate just happened to exist there or that she could see it or something, but that it was alive. It sounded so real. In the end, we avoided that way and took a different road home. Nothing happened after that, and she went home as well without incident. As I said at the start, I couldn't see or feel anything either, but I could tell from a glance that she was really, really uncomfortable. So I work as a helper, and I was walking down the street with an elderly man when we approached that area where my friend sensed the invisible shrine gate. I asked him if there used to be a shrine there in the past, and he said there was. He spoke in a roundabout way, so it was hard to get to the heart of the matter, but apparently there used to be a shrine there, but it was destroyed in a landslide, so they had to move it to a new location to make it safer or something. And the shrine gate was right next to where my friend was standing when she suddenly stopped. Of course, the rebuilt shrine was still in the nearby neighborhood, and it just happened to be the one that my friend said was dead. A shrine gate that exists now but is dead. A shrine gate that no longer exists but is there. I've no doubt it was nothing more than a coincidence. That was all. But the whole thing got me so worked up that I had to write it all down. I hope you enjoyed this story somewhat as well. Our final story this week sees a man arrive home to find some powder on the ground in front of his door. He notices a few holes have apparently been unsuccessfully bored into it and decides to let the real estate know. But what happens next is beyond even what he imagined. Find out why in Powder on the Doorstep. This is something scary that really happened to me. When I returned home late one night from work, I noticed some powder on the ground in front of the door. I bent down to see what it was and noticed something strange with the door. There was a hole in it. It was about the size of 2 toothpicks, and it was at about hip height. The hole didn't go all the way through, and the powder was on the ground beneath it, so it seemed it came from the door. But then, looking closer, it wasn't just one hole. There were 3 in total, with one near the hinge and another at about knee height. I was afraid that maybe somebody had tried to break in, but there was nothing wrong with the apartment. I slept that night with the chain lock on. I was exhausted from working late, and thinking that it might be termites, I decided to call the real estate the next day. After working late yet again the next day, I almost wanted to cry when I got home. There were more holes. Another one had been added at around hip height. I went back down to the apartment building entrance, almost in tears, and called the management company. The damage was so slight that I hesitated to call them though. Someone from the company came out and we decided to discuss it with the real estate the following day. I cried to one of my colleagues and spent the night at their house instead. The following day, the real estate contacted the police and the culprit was caught, just like that. The person who drilled the holes was my neighbour. I got news of the arrest while I was at work, so that day I went straight to the police station without working overtime. The real estate agent was there as well, and they explained what was going on. To tell you the truth, the same thing happened 1 year ago as well. Huh? I couldn't stop the shock that escaped my lips. You should have told me I was living next to someone so dangerous. No, the person who caused the damage and was charged was then evicted. I was flabbergasted. They were evicted. Somebody new moved in after that, and, well, they were the perpetrator this time. Apparently, when the police visited my neighbour to see if they'd heard any noise, they started acting suspicious, and then, after a barrage of questions, they finally confessed. They also located the previous criminal who lived somewhere entirely different now. Police said there was no connection between the two. As for the motive, apparently both of them said the same nonsensical thing. If I don't look, then I'll be looked at. So it was supposed to be a peephole then, but it didn't even go all the way through. I asked if anything strange had happened in the room next to mine, but the real estate agent denied anything ever had. But still, it was really strange for 2 different people living in the same apartment to go crazy like that. Plus, which apartment was the real problem to begin with? Mine? Or theirs? Who was looking from which room? Of course, I moved out right away, and things have calmed down since then. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Jojo, Baked Beans, and Endeavour. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to pick up Kowabana Volume 9, available on Amazon right now, and visit our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.